What is up guys, Andy Forrestine Runner here, and today we're going to be talking all things marathon fueling. In particular, we're going to be comparing the UNIVED Elite gels to the SIS isotonic gels. So with Abingdon Marathon looming large this weekend, I thought it would be a great opportunity to take this moment to talk a little bit more about marathon fueling, ultra-marathon fueling, if that's what you're training for, and compare these two awesome brands. Of course, I've used SIS for a very long time, and they've worked for me, they've worked really well, but of course I have always suffered with GI issues when I use gels, and it's been an absolute delight and a pleasure to finally find a brand, a gel, that does not give me GI issues. So today I just kind of want to go through the comparison, talk to you about both these products, give you the pros and the cons, and all of that good stuff. So if you're excited for today's video guys, make sure you hit that like button, share it with your friends, and of course do consider subscribing to the channel for weekly running content. And without further ado, let's dive in. Okay guys, so let's jump into the comparison of these two, and then we will dive into the pros and cons and preferences and all of that good stuff in terms of performance. But just a point to note before we dive in, the UNIVED gel that we're talking about here today is the Elite UNIVED gel. This is the larger of the two offerings that they have. If you go onto their website, you will see that they have a smaller gel size packet. So bear that in mind when we're going through what these things have in them. And of course, the second thing that you should really note when we're talking about fueling is that every person is different. Every person has personal preference, and of course every person burns a different number of calories per hour. So when I'm talking about the calories and carbohydrates and stuff like that in these gels, bear in mind I'm 6'6", I'm on the larger end of the spectrum, in fact the very larger end of the spectrum, and therefore I burn more calories than someone a lot shorter than me. I'm certainly around the 300 calories or 250 to 300 calories per hour mark when during intense exercise that I need to get calories in to replenish or top up. So without further ado, let's start off with SIS. Okay, so these SIS gels come in these 60ml packets, and they contain 87 kcal per gel per serving. So assuming you are able to stomach all of these things, you are getting nearly 90 calories per gel sachet. And they recommend on the back here, and these are suitable for vegans by the way, that you have or consume 3 of these sachets per 60 minutes. Which is quite intense. I've never managed that so far, and for those of you that have ever tried to do it every 20 minutes, you are probably sick of gels by now and completely gone off them. These isotonic ones in particular do state that you do not need them with water, which is fine, but it does also state on here that you must make sure you stay hydrated. So if you're running for your intensity, that intense level, you need to be consuming ideally 2 or 3 of these an hour. For me, being on the taller side, definitely 3 of these an hour. I've never managed that in the past. 4 or 5 is the most I've ever managed before, and I have managed to mix it up with some tailwind, and that was a relatively decent fueling strategy. That worked. In terms of longer distance races, I've certainly never managed to have more than 4 or 5 of these as I'm going. And in terms of what they have in them, there's nothing particularly exciting. It all sounds very manufactured, and it all sounds very much carbohydrate based. So in here you get 22 grams of carbohydrates. This is the orange flavour by the way, and this one's nothing special. This is just what I would call a box standard gel. They do have caffeine gels, and they do have other gels that have other ingredients in them, but in terms of this particular one, literally it has 22 grams of carbohydrates, 0.6 of those are sugars, and 0.01 grams of salt in it, and that is it. So this is not a gel that you're going to be wanting to feed yourself if you're looking for some salt replacement, although I do know that SIS have some gels that do that, and of course some caffeine ones, as I said. So in terms of the SIS gels, that's pretty much that for that one. So let's move on to the UNIVED gel. This thing wants you to take it 10 minutes before you start, which I think most gels recommend that you can have one before you start, and then every 30 minutes. Which is great, and that is because it's a bigger packet, so there's more in here, but of course that means just 2 of these an hour. Now within here we have 190 calories, which is great because 2 of these is going to give me 380 calories, which is actually more than I need probably, so I can actually probably stretch these to every 40 minutes, which is super. And within this one in particular, this gel by UNIVED is geared to provide you back the salt and the sodium, everything you lose, the electrolytes that you sweat out during your endurance event, in this case a marathon for me. And so within here, not only do we have obviously 190 calories, that's broken down into carbohydrates, 45 grams of carbohydrates, of which there are 25 grams of sugar, And then we have protein, magnesium, chloride, sodium, potassium, betaine, beta-alanine, and sodium bicarbonate. We have all of those things in here. All of these contribute to the salt, the sodium in particular, that we're sweating out, we're losing. So we're going to be putting all of that back in. And what that means for me in particular is I don't need to rely on other calories to put in my body. Maybe something like Tailwind. I can actually just focus on having these, having water, keeping my fueling system simple and easy. And this thing is going to give me everything I need during the marathon. So finally, pros and cons, preferences, and all of that good stuff. Well, let's start off with SIS gels. So for me, I've been using SIS gels for a long time, and one tip that I've learned over time is not to chug a gel all in one go, but it's actually to have a gel over a mile or a mile and a half and just have sips of it every now and again, especially the isotonic ones where you can have a bit, pinch it, run with it, open it back up, pinch it, let some more in, pinch it and go again. And that works quite well, but I do still get stomach issues with this thing. I tend to be able to work through it, but it's not ideal, of course. And so when we tried the UNIVED gels and I didn't get any of that, it was such a great feeling, which of course then made me want to take these things to the Abingdon Marathon. But I will of course take a couple of these just as a backup. I will put them in the back of my belt, just in case my stomach goes a bit funny, I need something familiar or anything goes wrong. But in theory, I don't intend on touching any of these during the marathon, in theory. In terms of preferences, the flavour on these is quite intense. The orange one in particular, all SIS gels I find are quite intense in flavour. And so when I was using these before in my marathons, I used to try and get a multitude of flavours to take around with me so I wasn't continually having the same thing. The orange one in particular tastes like some of those chewable vitamin C tablets you used to have when you were a kid. Very strong, very sweet, very sickly, and of course when you're having them in abundance, it certainly can turn my stomach. So I tend to mix these with banana and pineapple and citrus and all the other flavours that they offer. In terms of the UNIVED gels, they are very rich in flavour as well. Very, very rich in flavour, but it's a different type of rich. It feels a bit more like a real food, rich in flavour, and it's nice, especially the berry and the caramel flavour. The coffee one I've tried, it's okay. It's not my cup of tea, if I'm honest with you, or cup of coffee I should say, but the salted caramel one is absolutely divine, and the berry one is great as well. So I'll certainly be taking probably two of these, a berry one and a coffee one, and I'll aim to have, or try and stomach the coffee one later in the race. I will have a berry one first, and then I'll save these two for the middle section. And so that's my plan of attack, to be perfectly honest with you. In terms of preference, flavour-wise, this thing wins hand down. The UNIVED ones, it just feels like you're eating something real. In terms of how they taste and liquidy, they both are very much quite the same texture going into your mouth. They are both quite liquidy gels. The one thing you have to bear in mind with any liquidy gels, you've got to be careful when you open it not to spill any, because the worst thing, or the last thing you want when you're running is to get sticky fingers. And you can, of course, get sticky fingers with both of these gels. You all know what I mean. We've all had it. We've all been there. But in terms of preferences, definitely the UNIVED one takes the cake there. Flavour, the way it packed a punch on my 23-mile long run, it convinced me straight away, and I'm absolutely delighted to be trying this really properly in the marathon this weekend, and just giving it my best shot with these gels by my side. So in terms of preferences, definitely this thing for the win. So there we go, guys. Those are my thoughts on the SIS and the UNIVED gels. What are your thoughts? Have you used these two products? Have you used any of them? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you think of these products, or if not, what gels do you use and what is your gel strategy during your marathon? If you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure you give it a like. Of course, share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and I will see you this weekend for the Abingdon Marathon. Until then.